And now, please pray with me. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be acceptable in your sight, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Well, this week, of course, is our great communal and cultural feast of Thanksgiving. I'm sure you're all eagerly awaiting your Thanksgiving feasts. You have your own special meals, your own special dishes that you prepare. There's the great question, do you have the cranberry jelly that's in the can, or do you make it on your own? I wonder what the special dish is that you get every year, but you make just once a year for Thanksgiving. You get to spend time with family and friends. It's a wonderful celebration, and it's appropriate that we lift up Thanksgiving here in church. But of course, as Congregationalists, this day has special significance, because we are the theological and denominational heirs of the Puritans and the Pilgrims, hence the outfit. We have the opportunity to hear the story or to think about the story once again of those intrepid pilgrims who came over in 1620, somehow found their way to Provincetown as they first landed in North America, and then eventually to Plymouth Harbor. We have names like William Brewster, William Bradford, John Carver, Miles Standish, all these names that bring back memories of your childhood. The memories of that first brutal winter for the Pilgrims, and then that glorious Thanksgiving where they could celebrate all of God's blessings for those who survived, alongside and with the help of the indigenous folks without whom they wouldn't have been able to survive. And so today, I know, while some people in our society might have issues with the Pilgrims and they were not perfect, I do want to spend some time trying to see what we can learn from them and from their heritage. On Reformation Sunday a few weeks ago, I preached about the importance of theology in our own time. One of the things that is needed to re-inject a moral center to our society is appropriate thinking through about theology. And so I thought, what better thing to do on Thanksgiving Sunday than to talk about the theology of the Puritans and Pilgrims. I get to combine two of my favorite things, history and theology, into one sermon. And you're stuck here in the pews to listen to it. Now, the Puritans and the Pilgrims, as I'm sure you probably know, were Calvinists. They fell in the category of what's known as Reformed Theology. Now, when you think of Calvinists, I'm sure positive things don't pop into your mind. But I want to make an argument, or at least make a proposal, that there are ways to think about the broad outlines of Reformed theology in a context that does make sense today. And in so doing, we might just learn something for our individual faith journeys. The first thing you have to know about this Reformed theology, this thinking, is that God was preeminent, above and beyond. Unlike some theologies today where God is a small God who perhaps doesn't have that big a role in your lives, the God of the Puritans and Pilgrims was all-encompassing. And when I think about that same perspective today, one of the things that comes to my mind is just the incredible scale of the universe. This is something that always blows me away. We are one planet of 9, or 8, depending on how you count Pluto. We are one planet of 9 around one star. In our galaxy, there are between 100 and 400 billion stars. It is hard to wrap our heads around that number. We are in a galaxy that has between 100 and 400 billion stars. Apparently, in the broad universe, there are between several hundred billion to up to 2 trillion galaxies, each of which with 100 billion stars. These numbers are in fact so large we cannot wrap our heads around them. There are more stars in the universe than there are grains of sand on Earth. And we are one planet orbiting around one of those small grains. The universe is 14 billion years old. 14 billion years old. Humanity has only been around for about 100,000 years. Civilization for 10,000. We're just one of 8 billion people on this planet. It is the most obvious thing to say that on a cosmic scale, we are dramatically insignificant. And the Puritans and Pilgrims would probably agree. Compared to the majesty of God, you are insignificant. You really don't matter. Now, this is tough for us in our society because we're taught from a small age that we are the center of the world. When I was in swim team practice, or when I was on the swim team way back in the day when I was 8, I had all these ribbons. Like, I got a 5th place ribbon for getting 5th out of 6 people. I mean, I was important. I mattered. But on a cosmic scale, on a God scale, we really don't matter that much at all. At the same time, however, while you could affirm this incredible majesty and wonder and expanse of the universe, at the same time, human beings have these experiences, what theologians call a numinous experience. We have these experiences of the divine that we categorize as the divine. In all cultures, over all time, human beings have had experiences where they feel connected to this amazing majesty that is the universe, that we call God. Somehow, in our insignificance, we still can get a taste of something so much greater than ourselves. Moreover, human beings consistently have this observation that it feels as though in our lives there's some kind of plan. You know what I mean? You look back on your life, or you look forward, or there seems to be some sort of plan working through. This is something that theologians have talked about as providence, but it's a common human experience. How can that be amidst all the majesty of the world? John Calvin said that we each have the seed of the divine within us, in spite of our insignificance. And indeed, one of the miracles of being a human is that we have consciousness. The fact that we can even conceive of and think about things like the scale of the universe or the possibility of a divine creator is unique to human beings. As smart as dolphins are, I don't think dolphins are spending a lot of time contemplating the scale of the universe. That ability to have consciousness, to think about things, is that seed of the divine that's in each and every one of us. So you can see this is some of the perspective that the Reformed theologians would have. The incredible majesty of God, the mystery of God, our insignificance in the face of God, and yet somehow, for some reason, we have the seed of the divine within us. So that's one part of their system. Another part of their system is one that a lot of people don't like to hear about, which is their view on the human condition. And I'll give you a preview. It's not positive. So the first thing they would say is that humans actually have far less control over the world than we think. In its extreme form, we don't have free will. But even if you don't want to give up on that, you can acknowledge the fact that we have far less control over our lives than we think we do. Our DNA determines so much of our lives. How we look, our intelligence, what diseases might be lurking within us. How we're raised, our parents, the things that shape us, shape who we are as individuals. We have very little control over that. People who suffer from mental illness have very little control over that. Other illnesses that might strike you or family members. Think about that one break you got in life because someone came into your life. Did you control that? Time and again, when we think about it, we realize how little control we actually have. Accidents befall people. Diseases happen. We can control so little. Jonathan Edwards, the great 18th century congregational theologian, in his essay, Freedom on the Will, he took this to an even more extreme level. He said, yes, I can choose to pick up this piece of paper. I can choose to do that. But the circumstances in my life led it to be a virtual necessity that I was going to do that. I mean, I could just leave this pulpit, walk out here, and just be like, see you later, Wellesley Hills Congregational Church. But I'm not going to do that. The choices that we have are actually far more limited than we think we have. This is one of the things that Reformed theologians talked about. You actually don't have nearly as much control over events as you think you do. Another thing they said about the human condition is, you're really not that good a person. And this is something for us that's very hard for us to wrap our heads around, because we all know we're good people. And the Reformed theologians would be like, no, you're not. And I'll prove it to you. When I was in college, one of the books that my moral reasoning course had us read was Peter Unger's book, Living High and Letting Die. I'm not sure if any of you have read this book. Unger creates a theoretical situation. He's like, let's say you walk outside the Hills Church, and on your way out, you see an infant with its face down in a puddle that will surely die unless you lift it out of the puddle. Would you lift that infant out of the puddle? And surely everyone would be like, of course. I mean, obviously I'm going to save that infant from the puddle. And the person who doesn't is just a horrible human being. Well, let's say that infant was 3 blocks away. Now, you knew that this was the case. Would you walk 3 blocks to save that infant? Of course you would. I mean, who wouldn't walk 3 blocks to save a life? I mean, come on. And then he expands this in various ways. And Unger says, in our world today, for a relatively small amount of money, you can provide life-saving medication for someone who would otherwise die. That for you is really not that much. Even if you want to factor in corruption and all these different things, still, it wouldn't be that much money to save a life. And you don't do it. People are considered tremendously generous if they give away a mere 10% of their wealth every year, or their income every year, to charitable causes. That's the absolute pinnacle. But you have more than enough. And think of all you could do, but we don't do it. And then we just make excuses for why we don't. If I were to put a gun to your head, I'm not going to, but if I were to, put a gun to your head and say, are you doing all you can to alleviate suffering in the world? You would each have to admit, no, I'm not. This is what Calvinists would point out. You're not as good as you think you are. Also, let's say you in high school had the privilege of reading Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. I'm sure many of you have read Heart of Darkness. Here, Charles Marlowe, the main character, goes up the Congo River and gets to experience the horrors of King Leopold's personal fiefdom in the Belgian Congo, where if people did not bring enough ivory or rubber for the Belgians, they would have their arms chopped off. They'd still be alive, but they'd have to live the rest of their lives being cared for by others, or they'd see their children killed in front of them if they didn't bring enough rubber or ivory. And then, at the end of the book, he goes back to Belgium. And of course, in Belgium, there's all this wonderful wealth, and everything looks so pretty. But of course, it's built on the backs of those people in the Congo. The reality is, so much of our great life is built on the backs of exploitation in one way or the other. We have incredibly cheap clothing made by people that make a couple dollars a day. There's so many different aspects of our lives that are looking very nice here, and we happily enjoy it. This is the whole thing that Calvinists are saying. You're not as good as you think you are. You're just not. Think about the horrors of what's going on in the Sudan right now. Human beings are capable of that. We have to wrestle with that. So there's the second pillar. So now I see you're all happy now. You've got the God bit that the Reformed theologians talked about, this majesty of God, and the seed of the divine within us. You've got the human condition. We don't actually have that much control over things, and we're actually pretty bad people. But there's also a positive to this, don't worry. But in spite of this, these Reformed theologians are like the central piece of their theology was grace. Since you're not that good and you don't have that much control over things, nevertheless, great things happen. Great things happen to you. They happen to other people. People do reach out and help others, even though they get nothing in return. People do random acts of kindness. People do send that card. They do do those visits. There are so many things that do happen in the world. And these Reformed theologians would say, yes, and the nudge to do that is the grace of God that leads you to do that. It's God's grace that brings goodness into the world all the time. That is a gracious action of God. Think about that time where you just wake up one day and you say, I'm going to go do something good today. There's that nudge that comes up inside of you. Reformed theologians are like, that's God's grace, right there, whispering to you to go do it. What's a world without grace? I mean, that's the classic, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. But with grace, then you can have a world that actually has love and generosity in spite of all the bad things. And then they look at something like the scriptures and say, for all their faults, these are human constructs, but for all their faults, within these pages is the testimony of a people wrestling with God. And you can read the scriptures and be inspired by them. And for Christians, they can see this rabbi named Jesus, and in the midst of reading those stories about Jesus, be like, that speaks to me of God in a very real way. And if I want to be in line, in touch with the God that is so majestic, I've got to try and follow the example of this rabbi. Now you can see where this leads. This is basic outlines of this theology. One of the things I love about this Reformed thinking is it leads to a tremendous humility. You are not that good. No matter how successful you are in this world, you are not that important. And also, the good actions you do are because of the grace of God, not because of you. So don't be puffed up. So a proper Reformed thinking has tremendous humility in how you go about the world, and gratitude. It also is non-judgmental. A true Reformed thinking is not judgmental. If someone's doing bad things, you're like, well, of course they're doing bad things. They're human beings. Human beings are bad people. Of course they're going to do bad things. They just don't have the grace to do something better. We need to pray for the grace to be better, or be that grace in their lives to be better. I'm certainly not going to judge them for it. There's this amazing sense of wonder that comes out of it, and majesty that's in the world. And there's this call to lean into grace constantly and to see the whole world through this grace-filled lens. So yeah, I might not be a Calvinist, but I see a lot of value in the way they saw the world. Now, this Thursday, you'll be sitting around your Thanksgiving tables. You'll be sitting there enjoying your food, and maybe, just maybe, there'll be that cousin of yours that really, starts talking, and you're like, oh heavens, oh heavens. Remember these theology of the old pilgrims, and see if in the midst of it, you can give them grace. You can be humble. And you can see that person as a child of God with the seed of the divine within them.